welcome you to the Cedar Rapids Community School District Regular School Board meeting. Today is Monday, February the 10th, 2020. So I'd like to call this meeting to order. Could I have someone do the motion to approve our agenda as presented?
I move that the agenda of Monday, February 10th, 2020 Board of Education meeting be approved as set forth, and that each item is considered ready for discussion and/or action.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'll turn this over to Laurel because we need a roll call, please.
Director Borcherding?
Aye.
Director Merschbach?
Aye.
Director Newman?
Aye.
Director Garlock?
Aye.
Director Tominski?
Aye.
President Humbles?
Aye. Next, we'll move to a public hearing for McKinley, Roosevelt, and Taft Middle Schools for the ADA restroom improvement projects. Board Secretary Day, have you received any correspondence regarding this public hearing?
I have received no correspondence regarding this public hearing.
At this time, the floor is open. Is there anyone who would like to address the board regarding any of the hearings? Seeing none, this public hearing is closed. Next, we'll move to superintendent's report.
Well, thank you, President Humbles, and happy to provide some updates on some exciting things happening across our district. Right now, immediately, like in this moment, the Magnet Lottery is underway and has been underway electronically and on the sites of our schools, but just down the hall right here in the ELSC, we're providing access and opportunity for families to enter our Magnet Lottery school. We have 5 schools within our district that are magnet schools: Johnson STEAM Academy, Kenwood Leadership Academy, Cedar River Academy at Taylor, and McKinley STEAM Academy, and Roosevelt Creative Corridor Business Academy. So families who do not live within the boundaries of their magnet school or of these magnet schools have the opportunity to attend those schools, but in order to do so, they need to enter the lottery. We also invite those who are interested in our magnet program, who are not even Cedar Rapids Community School District residents, can open enroll and also enter the lottery. An open enrollment deadline for those out of our district is March 1st. The deadline for our lottery application process closes on Friday, March 6th at 11:59 p.m. So super excited, of course, for our magnet program. We are recognizing a staff member, Paul Hayes. Paul has been appointed to the open vice president, counselor coordinator director position by the executive committee of IASCA, which is the Iowa School Counselor Association Board. Paul is Future Ready Learning Facilitator for our school district. He leads all things counseling, all things support for our students, pre-K through 12. We very much appreciate his leadership and congratulate him on his appointment. We have a 100th day reading celebration. So the 100th day of school is a big deal around here. And certainly collaborating that marriage with reading makes it even more special. Last week we passed the 100th day of classes for the 2019-20 school year. Wright Elementary celebrated the event along with World Reading Day on Wednesday the 5th. Classrooms around the school Skyped with authors of their favorite books. These kindergarten and third grader students chatted with the author, Min Lay, and read from his book, Drawn Together. Students asked questions about what inspired him to create the book and the characters in them, as well as what his favorite foods and colors are. Amazing how our world becomes more connected. And so for that opportunity to happen, our kids need access. And so glad that could happen with a world-renowned author for our students. Pierce Green Team. Congratulations to them. They are the winners of the district's soil poster contest. Teams from across the district created an informational poster on soil quality. Our sponsor, Window World of Cedar Rapids, judged all the posters submitted and chose Pierce's poster as the winner. This team won $200 and starter seed packets. Excellent work to the Pierce team. Isn't that awesome? Yeah.
He's got a little green on.
He does. I think it was also Celebration Jammy Day at Pierce that day, which is a fun thing to do as well. So that's all for my highlights for the week, and certainly appreciate all the work going on around our district. Many things to celebrate.
Thank you so much. Do we have any board reports?
I do have something that I would like to mention, and that is that our very own President Nancy Humbles has been awarded and will be receiving an award for the Quarter Business Journal Women of Influence for 2020, which is an awesome accomplishment. And I'm so happy to work with her and have her reflecting our district. President Humbles received, I believe, over 12 letters of recommendation, maybe 13, from various organizations, including those representing University of Iowa, Cedar Rapids Community School District, ASAC, United Way, many different organizations that she has or currently is involved with as a capacity, volunteer capacity. So that's awesome. I don't know I should have had the date. Not sure the date.
We'll get back to you on the date for that luncheon.
I have a quick legislative update. The SSA, the school funding that the state sets at the first part of the legislative session today in the Iowa Senate, they passed a 2.1% increase, and I think it's expected that the House will act on that tomorrow. So probably, I think the House proposed a 2.5%. We'll see if that holds or if they'll settle with the Senate. As you know, we were asking for 3.75, so that falls short of what we need to do the business of educating our kids.
Any other reports? We will move on to communications, delegations, and petitions. And I'd like to remind those that request to address the board, when you step to the podium, please give your name and your address. And Board Secretary Day will be our timer, and you will have 5 minutes. But I also want to mention, too, additionally, in order to abide by the open meeting law, I want to remind the public that we will not be in dialogue there will not be dialogue between board members and the public during this time, except to clarify the nature of the questions or comments from the individual speaking. So when I call your name, if you could come to the podium, state your name and address. Tom Hart.
My name is Tom Hart, and I'm a Cedar Rapids resident. Do you want the exact address, or 1107 12th Street Northeast,
Okay.
Cedar Rapids, Iowa, 52402-3810. And I'm glad to see smiles on your face. This is not going to be a grueling address to the board. I'm coming to you as the District 2 representative of the Iowa Honey Producers Association, and not as a commercial message, but more of one in your regard as being the head of our educational system here at Cedar Rapids. You can understand that there's increased interest at all age groups for increased pollinator emphasis and specifically honeybee emphasis. It wasn't but maybe 10 years ago the demographic for beekeepers was exactly what you're looking at here. Since then, we're seeing a lot more diversity in age group, in races represented in our community, in sexes represented by gender, and it's opened up to a whole new episode of people interested in beekeeping. I thought, being the heads of education in the community, that it would behoove you to understand the proclamations that are being made by Governor Reynolds. Has declared February 13th Iowa Honeybee Day. Tomorrow at noon, Mayor Hart will have the same proclamation read, from the perspective of the Cedar Rapids Council. And we've been called into schools at various times to talk about bees on projects, often with the 5th grade level, doing independent projects. And it gets to be a frustrating point when, you can't tell them, yeah, you can have bees in your backyard or you can have them at your school, because it really has to have somebody's okay, and that might start at your level. I talked to Rod, and he's going to get the extra copy of this proclamation to, be ready when the trenches hit him. But the information contained within, I think, is worth hearing. So with your indulgence, and as long as I don't go beyond the time limit, I think we're in good shape. Whereas honeybees and native insects are important as pollinators for 1/3 of the food we eat, and honeybees are vital in the production of over 90 crops grown across the nation, many of which are in Iowa. Honeybees contribute to a healthy Iowa environment by assuring availability of fruits, vegetables, nuts, and flowers for wildlife and all Iowans. Whereas Iowa's 4,500 or 45,000 or more honeybee hives produce about 4 million pounds of honey, valued at over $8 million, and my honey costs about 4 times that amount. And honeybees provide an estimated $92 million of economic value to Iowa crops from their pollination. Iowa has over 4,500 beekeepers representing hobbyists, sideliners, and commercial beekeepers. Hobby beekeepers have as few as 1 hive to commercial operations with thousands of hives. Traditionally, beekeeping occurred in rural areas of Iowa. Now beekeeping increasingly occurs in urban areas with the rising interest of hobby beekeepers for keeping beehives in Iowa's cities and towns, including Cedar Rapids. We now allow them in all zoning classes. The state of Iowa has an active apiary inspection program to protect honeybees and beekeepers from the introduction and spread of apiary diseases and pests. Whereas honeybees face serious threats from invasive pests, decreasing bee-friendly forage, variable climate conditions, and increasing pesticide and herbicide pressure. Our state and county roadsides comprise a total of almost 115,000 miles, providing native plantings and reduced the mowing and spraying of herbicides on roadsides, and these are helping bee survival. Kim Reynolds, governor of the state of Iowa, proclaimed Thursday, February 13th, 2020, as Iowa Honeybee Day, and encourages all citizens, residents, and visitors to join in observing this day and focusing on the importance of honeybees to our state economy, to enjoy the honey and other products of honeybees, and to recognize the honeybees' role in maintaining our environment in Iowa, and to assist in reducing the threats to honeybee survival in our state. Ta-da!
Thank
Anything
you.
need to be clarified? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Next, we have Tanya Johnson.
Hi, Tanya Johnson, 3816 Riverside Drive, Northeast, Cedar Rapids. And I'm speaking as the Cedar Rapids Education Association president. I'm sure you're aware that our district is no different than school districts across the country. We're having trouble finding substitutes for classrooms, and the amount of teachers that apply for our jobs isn't as large as we have seen in the past. There's definitely a teacher shortage across America. We need to do everything we can in Cedar Rapids to continue to recruit and retain those strong teachers. Over the past couple years, I've been hearing more situations in classrooms that are being disrupted because of student behaviors. Teachers are being hurt, students are being asked to clear their classrooms, and student learning is being put on hold while behaviors are being taken care of by the classroom teacher. I am concerned that this may be one reason that we are losing some of those teachers and subs in our district. In the winter, Wendy Parker asked me as a CRA president to be a part of some listening sessions. These were held in November, December, and January. We received a bunch of feedback from teachers, paras, counselors, engagement specialists, and admin on the concerns with student behaviors and how to best teach our gen ed and special ed students. Now that we have had the listening sessions, we are using that information to work on a plan to address the issue. At the next school board meeting, Wendy and I will be sharing some information about that plan. I am glad we've been able to collaborate on this effort. It is extremely important for us to get this right for the sake of our students and our staff. We need to continue to collaborate on these and other concerns and improve the learning environment for our staff and students. It is also important for the culture and climate of our district to continue to make sure teachers' concerns are heard. Hopefully, our plan will help to retain the teachers we have and encourage others to come to Cedar Rapids. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move to our consent agenda. Are there any items that the board would like to pull for a comment, questions, or a separate vote?
President Humbles, I'd like to pull out item BA 20256, the master plan oversight committee membership approval.
So do you want a discussion about it? Would you?
Comment and discussion. I just wanted to say, I was looking at this agenda item, and this is a big issue for me, why I ran for the board, to be a voice for the community on this issue. And so I was going over the meeting minutes of this committee, from the last couple years over the weekend. And I think the committee is doing a good job, and so I think we should approve this membership list today. But I just wanted to make 3 quick comments on it. The first is the composition of the committee, the people that we have on the members of the committee, especially Pat Leffler, who's now an elected city councilor here in Cedar Rapids. That type of community involvement from the business community, from organized labor, the city, that's really great in terms of the master plan, in my view, because what I really want to see is our facilities, from the very basic stuff like we talked about with the Coolidge project in terms of water detention, to the bigger picture of what role do our buildings play in our community. It's our jurisdiction as a school board to decide those things, and we have the say and we control the budgets, but it's really a community issue because the buildings are part of the communities, the schools make the community. Like I said, that's my view, at least. And so I think that's really great that we've got people like that on the committee. And we've got a great cross-section, but the second point I wanted to say is you're never going to have all voices represented in a board like this. And so, and that's true for us, it's true for board-appointed committees like this and other board-appointed committees. And so I just want to, and going through the meeting minutes, it's true and it's clear that the board, this committee is taking that seriously as well, the type of people who are brought onto these committees and also getting feedback from people. Just want to make sure that that's my view of what we can do as a board moving forward on all things is really, and I think a lot of the members of the board, my colleagues feel the same way, is we really can make public education something that people really connect with, not just I send my kid to school and then I forget about it, but it's really something that we do as a public democratically, and serving on committees like this is a great way for people to do it. And these committees and us, we should be taking as much feedback as possible because some people don't have the time to serve on a committee like this. Some people, I know we have district representatives that don't vote on this committee but sit in as members of this committee. But some people might not feel comfortable as a member of the district, being on a committee like this. And so just making sure those lines of communication are open, I think that's great. And I think the people on the committee, are doing that. So I think we should keep that in mind when selecting members of the committee. And then finally, while I was going over the meeting minutes, there were questions that I had, and I was thinking about it, as I may have thought previously as a member of the public, what's this question? Why aren't they asking those questions? And it occurred to me that those are questions that the board sets for the oversight committee. This board sets our policy, sets our plans, and then the oversight committee checks those numbers for us when it comes to PEPAL funds, SAVE funds, the master plan in general. And so I just want to, while we're selecting members of this committee, members of this board need to keep in mind that being fiscally responsible with SAVE funds, PEPAL funds, with any funds, with any other board-appointed committee, that's our responsibility. And, moving forward, we have to make the best use of those funds as we see fit. And so we can't just, and I don't want to get in the habit myself of saying, well, the board-appointed committee has ran the numbers, so the numbers must be good. We're the first source of those numbers and the last approval of those numbers. So it's our responsibility to, make sure that we're being fiscally responsible in terms of the tax dollars, that members of the community pay in to make sure there's good facilities or anything else in the district. And so those are just the points I wanted to make. I think the membership of the committee looks great. I don't know if anyone else has any opinions on it, but just keep those things in mind when I'm looking at this committee and, interested to dig into what the other board-appointed committees, because I think this is the first time one of these board-appointed committees has come before us as new members of the board up here, and it's great to be able to see the work they've been doing in the years previous to us joining the board, and I'm happy with it.
Thank you. Any other, does anyone have anything else they'd like to discuss? If not, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
This requires a roll call.
Director Merschbrock,
Aye.
Director Newman,
Aye.
Director Garlock,
Aye.
Director Tominski,
Aye.
Director Borcherding,
Aye.
President Humbles.
Aye. Next, we're moving to learning and leadership. Tonight's learning and leadership presentation will focus on the 2019 Iowa School Performance Profile, and it ties directly to our strategic goals of student learning. I'll turn the presentation, over to Rod, Cynthia, and Eric. And if you could all please introduce yourself and include your title.
Okay. Well, thank you, President Humbles, and Board, we're so excited to share with you the Iowa School Performance Profile. I'm Rod Dooley, the Chief of Equity in the Office of Learning and Leadership. So I'll give some high-level overview, and then Eric is going to talk about elementary schools. Gary Hatfield is going to talk about middle schools, and then Cynthia is going to talk about high schools. So let me get the clicker. All right. School accountability under the Every Student Succeeds Act. Each state has to take that federal act and interpret it for the state. And the act requires states to develop plans for accountability, to set achievement goals, to identify schools that need support or to improve, and then to ultimately publish report cards that have data and information that help schools know where they need to improve. And they use performance measures to get at a score for the schools. And you can see the different areas here of measures all the way from the new Iowa assessment, the ISASS, to graduation rate, student growth, conditions for learning, talks about kind of the school climate, safety in the schools, post-secondary readiness that gets into the career and tech ed courses and pathways. Schools then receive a designation based on a score, so they aggregate some of those performance measures into a score, and a school gets a rating from exceptional all the way to priority or comprehensive, with priority being the lowest scores as you see. And our results, you'll see the number of schools that fell into each category. The exciting news about this, the schools that we had in 2017 that fell in needs improvement and priority, so below the acceptable level, there were 13 schools. And so you can see that we've moved from 13 to just 5 schools that fell into that category. So great work. And then those buildings that might have a designation, they would have 2 designations of either a comprehensive school, so they really fell in the lowest areas, and you can see some of those measures there, or targeted schools that might need some targeted support. And we had 9 buildings fall into that this year. I think last year there were 16 buildings that fell into that. So again, improvement is made. So now I really want to get to our highlights. This is really good news. Superintendent Bush is, she's bouncing off the walls because this is such good news. And so let me go at the district level. 24 of our 31 schools increased their numeric results. 17 schools moved up in their rating category, and 6 of those moved up 2 categories. So really great news there. 10 schools maintained their categories, and what you saw on the last chart, that there were no priority schools this year. And in 2017, we had 7 schools that were. So great work on staying focused on this. No comprehensive schools this year on the report card. 22 of our schools received no designation, so they were not comprehensive nor targeted. And then 9 of schools received targeted status. So this is great news to see, you know, from our state assessment that we are moving in the right direction. That schools are taking their school improvement plans very seriously and really are doing the work that it's going to take to move us forward. So, Eric, if you'll.
I can never get this thing Mark's looking. Still doesn't work right.
I didn't hit a button.
You did this on purpose.
Just point back there. Click it.
Mark, can you move?
Just
You hit a button.
there we go.
There we go. Well, good evening, President Humbles and the board. It's my pleasure to highlight the elementary school level in terms of our profile. Some of this is repeat, Rod already went through, but really excited at the elementary level. 15 out of our 21 schools increased their numeric results, or what we call the index. 9 schools actually moved up in their rating category. 8 schools maintained, and 4 schools moved down. And when to be very transparent, to move down, we had a couple schools that were cited, or their index for their IEP students. So we're working with those schools right now. In one school, their African American population. So we're addressing those, or those 2 schools, and the other 2 were, I think, IEP and ELL kids. So we'll work on those 4. Really, go back. Really excited to share this, though, and I'm going to give a big shout out to CRA at Taylor. They were designated as comprehensive last year, and they are not comprehensive this year. They actually went up 13 points on their numeric scale. And it is kind of emotional to me. I've worked with Andrea, the principal over at Taylor. They are doing fantastic work right now. They're a magnet school, as most of us know as well, so they're kicking that off. But it's really happening over there. So a big shout out to CRA in that they did meet the comprehensive school status this year. 18 out of our 21 schools received no designation. 3 schools received targeted. I kind of alluded to that a few seconds ago. So basically, our focus areas for these schools that are targeted, African American students, students with IEPs or special education students, and then English language learners. Reflecting on this presentation, I just want to spend a minute to share with you some thoughts. I've been here a long time in this school district. I'm extremely proud of what's happening right now, at the elementary level, K-12, but of course I focus on the elementary. I'm the little kid guy. I love that. But I started thinking about, why are we getting the results that we're getting? And first and foremost, it's the teachers. I'll be honest with you. Our principals are leading and having some courageous conversations with some people, but it is the classroom teacher that's making the difference. The other really paramount piece to this is our instructional coaches that are coaching teachers and giving them the necessary feedback through a non-evaluative way. So those are just wonderful things that are happening this year, and they have happened over the course of the years. And then I guess the last thing I want to share with you is our focus on literacy. This is year 4, I believe, in that, and I'm not going to get too deep with you tonight, but we have what's called a word recognition lesson plan that we adopted 3 to 4 years ago. And the person I replaced spearheaded that, Val Dozel, and I was really involved in that with her, and that has really made a difference in terms of teaching teachers how to teach explicitly. The other thing is that we have 12 schools going through what's called Propel, and it's a long acronym that basically means this. 12 schools have been identified where a team of teachers, admin, AEA staff meet on a weekly basis to study literacy moves and instruction, and they're looking at data every single week at those 12 schools. And then finally, the other part is the PL piece. We have 250 teachers roughly going through what's called letters training. And again, it is a pretty intense process if you talk to teachers across the district. They get a stipend or credit, obviously, for taking this PL, but it goes back to the science of reading. Science of reading can be very complicated at times for those of us that have taught reading, but those teachers that are within this letters training, intense, but getting feedback, and a lot of collaboration is going on amongst those 250 teachers, depending on what class they're in. So excited, very excited. I was just waiting to see these results, as a lot of us were. Do we have work to do? Absolutely. We always have work to do. That's part of the job, obviously, but very proud at this point. Things are just moving or looking up and continue to improve. That's about all I have. Thanks. Mr. Hatfield.
Gary Hatfield, I'm principal at Taft Middle School, my 12th year there, 27 years in the district, and middle school's near and dear to my heart. I taught at Wilson and Franklin. I was associate principal at Roosevelt, now principal over at Taft for 12 years, so I'm a lifer. So it's good to be here talking to you about our scores. It's exciting to see the scores go up as they have. We had 6 schools, it was mentioned before, that went up by 2 levels on their ESSA designations, and 2 of those were in middle school. So that's really nice to see. Again, I'm partial to middle school, but I view that as an incredibly crucial time for our kids. It's very pivotal as they move from middle or elementary to high school that those middle school years are exceptional. So as mentioned, our ESSA designation scores, 5 of our 6 schools went up in their numeric values, so that's the actual score that they went up in, not necessarily the designation. 4 schools moved up in their rating, and again, as I mentioned, 2 of those schools went up by 2 levels. So that's pretty fantastic. We had 2 schools that maintained their rating, and no schools decreased, which is fantastic. So, and that's again decreased in their rating. As far as comprehensive schools, no comprehensive schools. We did have 3 schools that received no designation at all, and by no designation, again, that means that there were no targeted areas that they needed to work on as far as the ESSA designation indicated. 3 schools did receive targeted status, but in each of those cases, the number of targeted areas went down. 1 school, for example, last year was targeted in multiple areas, all the racial subgroups, plus ELL, plus IEP, and this year it's only IEP. So although it still looks like targeted status, that targeted status is much, much less than what it has been in the past. And then, of course, our focus areas, if you look through our data, we're going to continue to work on African American scores. That's important to us as well as the students with disabilities. I did ask each of the middle school principals to give me something that they were proud of in the scores, and so I'm going to share this with you as well. I asked them for 3, but for time, we're going to go with 1. So give them a little extra work. But Franklin was one of the schools that went up by 2 ESSA designations. So they were very proud of that, as was Harding. Harding also went up by 2 designations. We had McKinley. They said they were proud that they were no longer targeted for their low socioeconomic students or their free and reduced lunch students, which is, again, fantastic. Roosevelt shared with me that they exceeded state growth for ELL by 4%, free and reduced lunch by 3%, and IEPs by 7%. So great things happening at Roosevelt. At Taft, I was very proud of our achievement in reading. We are well above the state average for everything, for all students, low SES students, IEP students, African American students, Hispanic students, multiracial, and white. The only thing that, and I don't quite understand this, we didn't have data for Asian students. Usually when you have under a certain number of students in your building, they don't report that data, and I would feel like we have enough Asian students in our building to have that, but if you check the website, there's no data reported for that area. And then Wilson was proud that they removed as targeted status their African American students and their multiracial students. So again, fantastic things happen in all those areas. I think the reasons why we're moving forward in those is largely due to our push on literacy. That's been led through many different groups. The principals group is one, the instructional coach group is the other, that have really been pushing this endeavor. Complex text is hugely important to our students. The amount of exposure we can give them to complex text really increases their capacity for reading and their capabilities in learning as they move forward. And I was thinking about an experience that I had the other day at Taft. I went in and I was observing a social studies classroom, and that teacher, I just walked in and started observing, and as I was watching, I was thinking to myself, they were doing a close read of an historical text, and I felt like I was in a language arts classroom. And that's really what we're looking for, because the literacy instruction that we're doing for all of our teachers is not just in language arts. It's for our math teachers, our social studies teachers. We have them all there. We have our PE teachers working on vocabulary instruction. So it's important that we have all those pieces. So the close read of text is one really important piece, and the other really important piece is pushing that vocab. And then I will say, accountability measures such as ESSA, sometimes they get a little bit of a bad rap because people hear these scores and everything. But the process of going through the ESSA system here, when we received our scores last year, we met and we spent 3 days looking at our buildings, looking at how we can improve, looking at things we could change. And we did that with a team and was supported by ELSC staff as well as some Grantwood AA staff. That was hugely important, and it's one of the reasons why the scores went up as they did. So the schools were able to look at their buildings, see what they wanted to work on, and really dig in and get going. As mentioned, this is my 27th year in the district. I've never been happier to be here. I see good things ahead for us, and I'm just looking forward to the path ahead. Any questions? And they only give me...
Not until the end.
Good evening, directors. I'm Cynthia Phillips. I'm Executive Director for High Schools, and I guess I'm the newbie on the panel. This is my first year here in Cedar Rapids serving the students and staff and community in the district. Very excited to be here, and this is fantastic information to be looking at, and then to really reflect on what is making the difference. So for all 4 of our high schools increased both in their numeric rating and their category ratings. So that's very exciting. And one of our schools moved up 2 categories. That particular school also reduced their targeted designations from 4 to 1. So with our designations, none of our high schools are comprehensive schools. 2 of them received no designation, and we do have 2 schools that received targeted status, and that was with the subgroups for IEPs or special education. So those are already some focus areas that we are looking at. When I think about the work as I've transitioned in and seeing some of the movement as we're going through high reliability schools work and those teams that are put together, academic roadmap that's been set forth, getting really clear on, at the high school level, what our guaranteed and viable curriculum is. And so this is being very clear on what our standards are and what we're teaching, how we're asking kids to be assessed over those, and then how we're giving feedback and communicating so that students can be engaged in that. So I think those are some critical pieces that we're starting to layer in and continue to give professional learning around and move forward. Specifically, our work this year, at the high school level, it became pretty apparent that we needed to really look at MTSS system, which is a multi-tiered system of supports for our students. These are pretty robust in some of the younger grades, which is typical in school districts. High school is a unique setting to deal with some of the multi-tiered system of supports. So we've been doing learning around what this can look like for Tier 1, which is basically what's our goal for all students to have access to, because this is the difference maker in student engagement at the high school level. Student engagement often drops to about 33% at the high school level, so we need to do a better job of making sure that we're connecting with students and helping them see that their learning is relevant. And so we're spending time around that, along with other work that we're doing to support specific pathways for kids. And so there's many different ways that we can pursue our education and our post-secondary life. So making sure that we're defining those, and we've got a system in place to support students in whatever pathway that may be, and that they can switch pathways too as we grow and learn and have our interests change. So I would say that's some of the work that I've become familiar with here, and I continue to lead and support and am really passionate about, so that we can have all of our students have just the best experience possible in preparation going forward after graduation. Thank you.
I asked all of them to come back up, so, so I'm sure that you have questions or, well, one more slide. Yeah. So one of the things that comes with the report card, anytime a school does have a designation of comprehensive, then the state is going to come and do a visit to provide support, not a compliance, but how do we continue to help support you? So last year, Taylor was the one that was designated comprehensive. So we do have a site visit coming up March 24th, 26th. And it won't really be focused on that school. It's going to be really focused on the district and what are the frameworks and things that we have in place to provide support to all of our buildings. All right, so questions, feedback?
First of all, I'd like to thank you guys for the presentations, and we really owe a lot of thanks to our teachers in this district. Great work. We've made great strides, and we know that there's still work that we need to do. And I'm surprised that Noreen is just sitting here so calmly. But we do. We owe it to our teachers, too. They're in there day to day taking care of our students. So I thank them. And also, if the board has any questions, and I'd like to remind them, out of respect for the presenters, to maintain the focus on this body only, and that ask questions that are relevant to the presentation. So are there any questions from the board?
I have a question. We talk about targeted focus areas. Can you talk just a little bit about how the supports you've put in place and the work that you've done over the past year support students at all levels and not just the focus areas? Any level, doesn't.
Yeah, and I would say you probably heard that through all of them. The Tier 1 supports that Cynthia talked about, each area has Tier 1 supports. That is, this is what every student gets and what every student should expect. And so throughout the course of really the last several years, we have had a focus on strengthening those Tier 1 supports. And I would say that some of that really is showing up in this data. Others want to chime in?
I think at the elementary level, the other focus has been when the student is not reaching proficiency at the core level. We have spent, it's been 2 or 3 years now that we are running some intervention support, and the district is working with Title I teachers. Okay, what's that look like when a student is struggling in reading, and we have all this data? Let's drill down, let's look at the specific skills that they need, and the Title I teachers that are there to provide additional support are looking again at the word recognition lesson plan, and there's fidelity checks along the way so that we make sure that we are really focusing in on those kids that are struggling. Seems to help.
So do you mind if I just jump in?
I knew that. Yeah, we're done.
President Humbles is right. She can only be quiet for so long. So through our high reliability schools framework, that has become common language vertically. So it's really, Principal Hatfield mentioned this earlier. We did these intense days of study with each building brought their leadership team together, and we facilitated as a community how to take a deeper dive around our school improvement plans. Those school improvement plans are for all students, but then also, in addition to that, beyond Tier 1 instruction, what's Tier 2, Tier 3. So they dug in on their own data about what do we need to improve for everyone, as well as designated particular areas. But in the first 3 levels of high reliability schools, first is a safe, supportive, collaborative environment. I'm really encouraged for next time's presentation with Tanya Johnson and Wendy Parker that's going to highlight some of that universal work, but also where do we need to take a deeper dive. Level 2 is effective teaching. So now every single teacher in Cedar Rapids Community School District now has a common instructional framework called the New Art and Science of Teaching. This is a requirement from the state, but I'm happy to say that Cedar Rapids was way in front of the state when we implemented. And so that will continue to be the common language and explicit instructional components. That's a growth-based model, not punitive. It's all about you can get better at anything in your classroom and encouraging that. So that's the common language for our instructional coaches. And then the third level is the guaranteed and viable curriculum, which is what Cynthia highlighted in regards to, we got feedback from our teachers that says, yeah, we've had access to things, but it wasn't the same for every area. It looked different. If you're an elementary teacher, you're teaching all content. And if my curriculum map for math looks like this, and then now my curriculum map for literacy looks like this, and they're different, that's actually causes more work for a teacher to translate. So we've created common frameworks so that things are more accessible, easier for our teachers to understand. And we have what's called a professional learning community process, where our teams that teach the same thing can actually get together around their students' work and have access to that common teaching vocabulary, the intervention systems, and the guaranteed and viable curriculum. We've just gotten tight, much tighter about all of that. So I would say that's for all kids, not just the targeted groups.
Thank you.
When you look at the 6 schools that jump 2 categories, I think I get excited about all this stuff, but that just seems like, everybody should be jumping up and down for that. Specifics happening in those schools that you maybe could share with us that you think we should, try a little bit harder to spread to other schools?
Well, 2 of the schools at the middle school level, that was Franklin and Harding that did that, and I think in all the buildings, it's exceptional work done by a lot of people. So I'm not sure that they were doing anything much different or much out of the ordinary than all the other buildings. That just saw greater results for them. I know that both of those buildings really were again pushing that literacy work. I do know that. Harding was really excited about their work with standards-based grading, the fact that they were using standards referenced instruction instead of just, sometimes the hit and miss stuff that happens with the standard grading system. But it really was kind of collaborative efforts throughout the district, a lot of similar things done in similar buildings, which is great because it does show that all the buildings did well. It just so happens that these 2 buildings did extraordinarily well. So, and you see great things happen in a lot of different places. I think about in my own building, we were targeted for students with special education goals in reading last year, And this year, through some targeted work, working with those students and really looking through their IEPs at individual things, Taft was number one in that. We, of all the 6 middle schools, and I looked at all of our surrounding middle schools as well. The Marion schools, I'm a data guy. The Marion schools, you know, and whatnot. So proud of that. So it shows that when you do have targeted work in specific areas, you really can make progress.
I'd say data guy, and also we're okay with being competitive.
Yeah, and I'm competitive too.
That's right.
So following up on what Director Tominski said, was there any one measure that we saw that was responsible for a lot of these increases, or was it just, because, you know, looking at what the state is looking at here, where was it? You know, the performance profile measures, was there one thing responsible for a lot of the growth, or was it just things all over the board, you know, targeted, like you said?
So the High Reliability Schools framework is a school-based model. So it's common language for our entire district, but each school looks at their data and makes the plan for their kids in their school. So the high schools, as Director Phillips was highlighting earlier, the school that reduced, they still have their special education category, but they had 3 other designated categories. Actually, I think it was maybe 4 other designated categories. But as they targeted their work for those particular categories. So, for example, they knew they needed to increase gen ed access for their English language learners. And so that's what that particular school worked on with the instructional designs and supports that those students needed. So I would say it's the targeted direct instruction universally across all of our schools that caused the improvement. But the strategy used at the elementary level was different than that used at the high school level. But it was having that common language and a system to analyze what the targeted needs were at each building.
Yes, so 2 thoughts with it. The complexity of the work is going to end up being where each school is going to make their specific school plan. But what I appreciate so much and what I was very excited about when to transition into Cedar Rapids is the High Reliability Schools framework, because that is a research-based process where we know that first and foremost we have to have a safe and supportive collaborative environment for anything else to happen. So because all of us are making that our initial focus, and then from there we build on, we have to know what it is we want kids to know, and we have to know how they're going to know it. And so when we can get crystal clear around that, that framework really allows us to do that. So that's a common language across all schools, yet the specific work within each of those is very individualized. But I really commend the district for the resources and support to adopt that framework, because that is a difference maker, and I think we're seeing how some of that's living out. The other thing I was going to say at the high school level specifically with this work is around equity and access issues. And so really going in and auditing some various areas there to make sure that first and foremost, when we talk about Tier 1 and Universal Core, that every child has access to any course and any opportunity that they need. And then our job is, how do we support them to gain that? So, thank you.
And then also, I forgot my question. Give me a second here. So amongst all 3 school levels, we still had IEP as a focus area going forward. Is that something that so, you know, our system of targeting is something that we want to do going forward? Is that something we have the resources? Do we need more resources? Those are oftentimes, you know, obviously it's all a funding issue from the state and everything, but is that something that we need to really be focused on and get more for in order to make those increases?
Yeah, I think if you talk with Wendy Parker, who is the executive director over special services, she would say certainly it is an area that we have to continue to focus on. She and her team, along with the building leaders, they're auditing our practices in each of those areas and looking for those opportunities where we might need additional resources. And I would say that this is one area where we do get additional resources. We're able to fund things in special ed of areas where, and with this data, it would target us where we probably should provide more support and more resources.
Okay.
I just have one quick question. Is there any collaboration between teachers, say, in an elementary school that previously was targeted in the IEP category? They've come out of that target group. Are those teachers helpful to teachers in other buildings who are still in the target category or have targeted populations? Is there any collaboration across buildings, I think is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think that, number one, this data is, we're just getting this data, so we haven't really entered into that stage. But we do know that the principals do collaborate a lot in their meetings around their school improvement plans. So if you've got a focus area around IEP or African American students, what are you doing to address that? And so in their administrative team meetings, they do collaborate a lot on their plans.
The middle school teams actually do learning walks in each other's buildings to look at best practice as well. But I know of, well, Eric, maybe you can comment to this, but I know of a couple of circumstances where our evidence shows that within one school, maybe a particular grade level team had different results, like an anomaly, like major growth, and that we've married them with another elementary school who needed different, or asking a different set of questions. So we have intentionally created some of those opportunities, but I think it is an area of opportunity for us to really, now that we have different results and we're on the right track, how do we lean on each other's strengths that way?
Yeah, I think one of the things, and like I said, I've been here a long time, one of the things that was always a little bit frustrating to me as a building leader is that I didn't know other people's scores. And so we have gotten very transparent. So all the building leaders now know who's scoring what and who's doing well at a specific grade level or a specific subgroup. So we are having those conversations. And for example, X school is doing very well in third grade with special ed kids or African American kids. What are you doing? Because we need to start sharing that learning. Is it instructional strategies? Could be relationship building. There's a lot of different factors. And so, yes, to answer your question, I mean, we are starting that, and the data is now transparent. Everybody sees each other.
Good.
The other things we have as far as sharing strategies between buildings in the middle school, and this is true in the high school and elementary as well, we have curriculum connection days on Fridays. So some days on Fridays we're doing professional learning within our building, and other days teachers are getting together in job-alike groups throughout the district. So specifically your question about special education, roughly about once a month, all the special education teachers from middle school are getting together to discuss those common practices and ways to move forward. And they do it also by levels as well. So some of our significant disabilities teachers will get together, some of our moderate teachers, and some of our Strat 1 teachers will get together. Additionally, we have some vertical articulation that happens when we have, at the end of the year and the start of the year, as we have our counselors and our special education teachers meeting with the levels above us and the levels below us in order to make the seamless transition from students from one level to another. Oftentimes, a student with disabilities may have just a small tweak to their educational program that makes a significant difference. So we kind of feel like, well, why should we reinvent the wheel? Let's talk to the elementary. Let's figure out what worked well with that child. Let's move them through middle school, and then let's make sure the high school knows about that program as they move forward. We've found a lot of success with that.
Just one last kind of big picture question, I guess. We heard from the Cedar Rapids Education Association earlier about the reality of, what goes on in a teacher's classroom. And then, you said you're a data guy. I like to look at data too and want to kind of understand things through that. And is there ever any, how do we feel about these measurements? I know we're stuck with them. We're, forced into doing them by state law and federal law and everything like that. But just want to, is there any tension ever between the realities of the teacher's classroom and taking the time out to do these sorts of things, just from your perspective as administration, working with teachers? Everyone's got their role to play. Just any thoughts on that?
So you're absolutely right. This is a one-time measurement, and we see it as it's an annual measurement that shows us from year to year how we're doing from a big picture, not just from the assessment, but also there's a survey called the Conditions for Learning Survey that's new as part of a requirement for our state with ESSA, which actually assesses all the things that you're just discussing of like how safe do you feel in your school, and our students get a voice on that. It's grades 4 and 5.
6 through 12, but they're developing
4 and 5, right? Yeah, for this year.
Yes.
Yeah, and so, so all students 6 through 12 participate in that. So all of those metrics become part of our Iowa school performance profile. But the team might make fun of me with my circles, but I think about things from a really broad perspective. That's state level data. But then we dig in on our district level data. Our district data that drives our conversations are district level assessments, and then every school conducts these HRS surveys. So those high reliability school surveys, which are 360 measurements actually. So the staff takes a survey, we send it out to our parents as well, and then students from intermediate grade level all the way up through 12th grade. And so they give us feedback on that safe, supportive, collaborative environment. That becomes even more meaningful to us because it is our data. FAST screening assessments is one of our screeners, and then also at the middle school level, we have the iReady screener as well. Those are more frequent and tell us more immediately right now how our students are doing. The state's having conversations around making, there actually are screeners for social emotional learning behaviors as well, and math screeners too that we can invest in and use for our district as we move forward. So those screeners are not achievement measures, but rather screening for how our kids are performing on benchmark, and then inform our instruction as we move forward. But the reality is we also don't want to over-assess, because instruction and that daily community experience for a teacher is so important. That's where the rubber meets the road. And so not overtaxing our teachers, but yet giving them the relevant tools that they need. So I think we're finding that better balance, but getting feedback from our teachers of like what's too much and then what's just enough. And then the next board presentation, when Tanya Johnson and Wendy Parker dig in, I think we need to get to that next level of question about the reality of the classroom and what our teachers are experiencing every day.
Is there ever any situation where the state would allow, a waiver on anything if we had our own district, things? It's just, we have
Not
to do
yet,
what they,
no.
we can add on top, but it's not.
Yeah, we can do all the additions, but this
we're
is the
still
state
gonna have to do
required.
what they say.
Yeah.
In terms
Yeah.
of those things. Okay.
And there
And
may
I,
be a federal mandate as
yeah.
well.
And I think that, the one area that she talked about, the conditions of learning, is, I think, data that we've got to dig into more. Even if you look at that data across the state, it is the lowest measure of all the measures, that conditions of learning. And so we see it at a state level, that there are issues around safety in schools and the environment and student engagement, but we're right there as well. It's one of our lowest also. And so it is a data point that at least points to what I think our teachers are feeling, our staff is feeling, and the feedback that we're getting of what really is happening in the classroom. So even though, they have us take these assessments, there's good learning out of these assessments to really point our work.
One last piece, just a differentiation in that last slide that Rod had that up that said compliance versus support. The way that Iowa, our state, has implemented Every Student Succeeds Act feels much more supportive versus our former act of No Child Left Behind felt very punitive. I'm old enough to say I've lived through the experience, and which was maybe not, it wasn't not intended that way, but the way that our state has implemented ESSA, our site visit that comes on the 24th through 26th, they want to learn with us and also find out what we need and what do our teachers need. So I'm looking forward to that site visit as a true measure of support.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks.
I want to remind folks you have a copy of the school calendar and also board members to fill out your meeting evaluations. With no further business, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.